Hello again, this is a Chapter 11 video. We're going to look into graphical user interfaces. So, considering GUIs, there's a few things to think about in terms of principles. The components are the main GUI building blocks used in Java. These consist of buttons, menus, sliders, J buttons, and other components which we're going to introduce to you. The other thing which you need to be aware of is layouts. Now layouts, there's quite a few different kinds of layouts which you can use, and we're going to look at that later as well. Not in this video, but in a later video. And we're going to consider layout managers and how exactly a window which you create for a graphical user interface is going to be laid out. The other important bit which we're going to introduce in the later video as well is the events, so reacted to user input. So when you create a button, a J button or another component which allows users to interface with the application, then by default they don't automatically do anything. So you must connect what the button does with the button itself. And so this is done using events. So this is allowing the buttons and components to react to a user input. Now, in order to achieve this, we use some packages from Java. We use the AWT and the swing packages, and both provide different things, but in total this is what we use for our GUIs. So in terms of the inheritance hierarchy, it looks a little bit like that. So all those in yellow are the AWT classes, and all those in that sort of light blue colour are the swing classes, and we use both. Now, you see in the blue there, you see a number of the different components, and we're going to introduce you to a J button, we're going to introduce you to the J labels, and some other bits and pieces there. We're also going to introduce you to the J menu item and J menu, which we're going to look at in a second, just to give you an idea of some of these components. Now, when you are creating your graphical user interface, you need to create a window and some starting point. And in order to do this, you need to create some kind of top-level container. And what we do for this is we create what's called a J-frame, and that is used as our top-level container. That effectively is the window that you see on the screen, and then everything sort of is connected to that. So the top-level containers that are available are the J-frame, J-dialog, and the other one which isn't shown here is the J-applet. But we're going to be focusing on the J-frame in this particular presentation. So once you've got your J-frame and your main window, then you need to put things in it effectively. In order to do that, the way that Java does it is it uses what's called a content pane. Now, what the content pane does is you have a root pane for your particular J-frame, or for your frame, and within that there's a number of different panes. Now, the different panes which are on show there are of all of interest, but you probably won't need to understand or use all of those until later on in Java. The layered pane there is for putting things on top of one another, and the glass pane is for putting things over the top of buttons that you've already put in place or other components. The main one which we're going to introduce you to and which you're going to need to work out and how to use is the content pane. So it's the content pane which actually stores all of the components that you need to use within your application or within your GUI. Now, the menu bar is not stored on that. The components of the menu bar are not stored on the content pane. They are just added to the J-frame itself. So here is a J-frame example. So we've got our J menu bar shown at the top there, which again is a component, and within that J menu bar you can store J menus and J menu items. Again, those are all components which can be stored. Then you've got the rest of the window, which is sort of everything below the J menu bar. Now the J menu, everything below that is all stored in the content pane. Things like J labels, J panels, J buttons, all of the bits and pieces stored around which are not in the J menu bar are stored in this content pane. So let's have a go at creating our first frame. So the first bit of information we're going to need to look at is this. So you've imported three main packages there. The top one is the AWT package, the bottom one is the swing package, and the middle one is the event package. Now we don't actually use the event package in this particular class, but it's there for when we start connecting up our events and our event listeners, which we're going to do in a later video. What we do is we create a type JFrame in our fields, and then the first thing we do is in the constructor we call this makeFrame method. Now this is the makeFrame method here, so this is in the end of this class that was shown on the previous page. We have our method here. The first thing we do is we create our new frame. So we defined our JFrame, but now we're going to create our new JFrame. If you look in the constructor for the JFrame class, you'll see that it can take one parameter of type string, and that's going to be the string which is shown on the top of the JFrame. Now, the next line here is our container content pane. So I mentioned previously that all of the components are stored in the content pane of our JFrame. So what we need to do is we need to get a reference for that content pane. So the way we do that is we say frame.get content pane. If you have a look in the API, what you'll see is that frame.get content pane will return a type container, and which we can call content pane. Now what we can do with that, now we have a reference to that called content pane, is we can now add things to the JFrame itself so we can actually see it on the screen. That's exactly what we do in this line here. So we create a JLabel, which is a component, and we give that, there is one of the constructors in JLabel is just the string which is what it says on the label, as you can see there in the sort of in that there, that's the label which we're doing. Once we've created the JLabel, we then need to add it to the particular content pane that we're working with. Now, like I say, we've already created a reference to the content pane of the JFrame we're working to in the above line, so we call that content pane. So all we need to do now is do content pane.add. For more information on that particular method, you'll need to look in the container class in the API. So the next thing we do then is we need to make the frame visible, and there's two ways we can do this. We can use the show method, but the show method frame.show is actually deprecated. We then set visible, and then we can set the visible using the true boolean there. So those two methods are external method calls to the JFrame class. So there's a number of different classes we're using in this particular program. We're using the JFrame, container, JLabel, and yeah, I've already said JFrame there. So let's have a look back at our hierarchy, see what's happening here. So here's our hierarchy again. So as you can see here, the container is something which we're using. We're also using the JFrame here. We use a JLabel, which is over here somewhere. There's the JLabel there. So we're using those four parts of the hierarchy. So once we've done that, let's see what we end up with. So here is the particular class. Those are the import statements at the top there. Those are our fields, or that's our one field. Our method call there, where we can create the new JFrame, get its content pane and have that as a container, and then add some things to that container. Once the things are added, then we can set that all visible. And appeared off screen there, but that's what that creates there. Okay. So now once we've created our JPane, or our JFrame, what we can start to do now is create our menus. So what we do is we a number of different components we can use here, which is a JMenu bar, a JMenu, and a JMenu item. So what we do is we do something like this. Now the difference is, remember here, is the JMenu is not needed to be added to the actual content pane. It can just be added directly to the JFrame itself. So that's exactly what we do here. We create our new menu bar at the top there, and then we add our menu bar using the set JMenuBar, which is from the frame class, and that takes a parameter of a JMenuBar. Have a look at that in the API if you're not at this point. Then again, we create a JMenu type, and the JMenu types is the bit, so file, edit, view, normal bits on the top of a file menu. We then add that to the menu bar which we just created. Now, in order to add our menu items, open, close, or whatever you need to add, and this is known as a JMenu item. Again, we create the item itself and do a file menu dot add. So we add it to the particular file menu we're adding it to, and then we add that open item there. So let's have a look at how that works. What I'll do is I'll just copy and paste this method into here, and I'll just pause the video so you can... Okay, so I've added my make menu bar. What I've done is copied and pasted there and paused and restarted the recording here. So there's my make menu bar added to my imageviewer class. Now I need to call that method so that it runs. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call that in here. It doesn't really matter where you call it as long as it's after the frame has been created in this particular method. So let's just make menu bar, and then you need to pass the reference, which is the frame. Take it from here, compile that, run, and again this is appeared off screen, and then you get your file open and quit. This is not doing anything at the moment because we haven't set up our action events and our listeners. That will be done in the next video. See you then.